Excuse me, sir. Can you give me your best what?
What?
Did you guys know that all of the seas in Pacific Ocean are all pronounced differently?
Wait.
And on that note, welcome to the What Podcast. And today we have a thought. Today we are talking about foster care and family relationships.
Yeah, so for announcements today, we only have one. We're going to be having either next week or the week after, we're going to be having Josh Adams come on and talk about race, diversity, racial reconciliation, things like that from the perspective of a black man. In the news today, it's not something that happened this week, but it has had carryover effects. The shootings in East Knoxville at Austin East High School. 3 students dead. 2 of those 3 students have gone unsolved. So the families are having to face a lot of pain from losing a child, and also frustration with nobody being held responsible.
All right, now we're going to get into the topic, which is something that is near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of family who went through the foster care system, a lot of my siblings, and I have a lot of siblings. And to do that, today we brought in Mr. Dak Andrade, someone who we consider to be a knowledgeable person in this. So, Dak, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, first, thanks, guys, for letting me come on the podcast. So I want to preface this with saying I'm not a professional in this area by any means, not even close to a professional. I have had experience in currently working at Sevierville, Smoky Mountain Children's Home in Sevierville, Tennessee, and then I've been semi-adopted, and what I mean by semi-adopted is, so I had legal guardians who weren't my biological parents my last 4 years of high school. And they pretty much adopted me. It just wasn't, the paperwork wasn't done. I mean, they were my legal guardians through paper, but they weren't my adopted parents through paper, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I'm Dak. I am a junior at Johnson University in Knoxville, Tennessee. I am studying psychology and family studies with an add-on of family educator certificate plus Bible and theology. And I'm from Indiana originally. As I said, semi-adopted, come from pretty abusive background, absent parents, mostly my father, who was absent and abusive. But my mom was disabled, so she did as much as she could for us with what she had. So. Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
No problem, man. Yeah, we do appreciate it. Something that I think often gets overlooked is foster care and adoption. You know, like I said, I had a lot of family that was adopted. I myself am adopted, and a lot of people want to do it, but sometimes there's a stigma on it, and people kind of scares them away. I know it can be pretty pricey.
Yeah. It is, which is unfortunate.
I know a lot of the social services are not always the greatest to deal with.
Yeah.
So, So we have some facts here that we kind of want to talk about that kind of struck close to us and we think are pretty mind-blowing. So the first one we got is 6% of the children in the U.S. will find themselves in the foster care system before they turn age 18.
That's a disgusting number.
That is
6% of children will find themselves in the foster care system. Now,
And
that's
only,
not, that 6% could be, it could be abusive families. It could just be a student or a child skipping school and is put in a placement facility by a case manager.
Yeah.
But still, 6%, that's a scary
And
number.
I mean, that's only in the United States alone. Think about, like...
And especially in other countries, how adequate and how efficient, effective is their document system. So
Right.
I figure that they have might be even higher.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and too, like, a lot of people do foster kids from other countries.
yeah, absolutely.
Um,
We have many professors here on campus who have adopted from other countries. You know, the Lintons, Sailors, Eubanks. Yeah, so it's also a very expensive process, which is unfortunate.
yeah.
Because you're just putting a price on life. But yeah, it's unfortunate, and also you got to think about the 6%. How many kids are homeless, but not in the foster care system and not documented because they're not in the foster care system, but they're homeless and don't have families in that retrospect. So we need to care for our children. We really do.
I know for me, I actually never went through the foster care system. I was kind of lucky to dodge that bullet, but I remember when I was living with my mother, we were living in and off of the streets. It was in and out of places and stuff like that, and I definitely know that life, and I can relate to them, a lot of these kids pretty well, and
Yeah.
it gets overlooked a lot. It's one of them things that we talk about and we say it, especially as a church, and then we're not always great at doing that. We're not always great of providing ways to do that. There's all these services and there's all these things out there, but a lot of times these kids need some consistency in their life, and they need people to be there and care for them. And when they don't have that, then their whole life kind of crumbles from underneath
Yeah,
them.
and it just takes one caring adult in each of these kids' lives,
Mm-hmm.
And the point of foster care system is obviously family reconciliation. Like that's the goal of foster care system and placement facilities, but it's like, yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. So another fact that we found, kids who go through the foster care system are 7 times more likely than non-foster youth to have depression and 5 times more likely than to have anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, for me this makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if you think about anything above a level 1 facility, right? So Smoky Mountain Children's Home was level 2 facility. A lot of these kids who go through the foster care system have some sort of trauma, neglect, abuse, some sort of life-altering event that happened, and it's really sad to say that, and I don't want to normalize it, but it makes sense.
Yeah. When you think about even just looking at our generation as a whole, we're the most depressed and anxiety-ridden generation ever, and the fact that these kids are so much more likely to experience it it at a increased level,
Even more so.
yeah, is sad.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that's just like depression and anxiety, which are big things, but like imagine like social awkwardness, when you're not, when all is abuse or drugs or alcohol, and then you kind of get out into the real world and away from it, like, it's like a bubble, and then once you get outside of that bubble, like, well, what do I do now? I mean, not to mention PTSD, that can be a thing too. There's a million other.
It absolutely is a thing, yeah.
There's a million other things that can go into this. It's not just anxiety and
No,
depression.
yeah, there is a ton of disorders that children who go through the foster care system are going to have because of the things that they went through and the things that they're going through. Yeah. Literally, just if you take a child who hasn't been abused, who's come from a very good home, and one night something happens, case manager gets called, police get called, that separation anxiety right there could start forming, and then that could turn into even deeper things. So it's literally anything could spark it.
Abandonment issues can, long-lasting term effects of it too. Dak, I did hear you say something about level facilities, like level 1, level 2 facilities. You care kind of explaining what those are, how that works?
Yeah, so there are 5 different levels. Level 1 being, it could be very, very minimal thing that happened that separates the child from the parent. And then level 2, level 3 are a little bit more at-risk youth. Skip school, maybe a little bit juvenile delinquency. And then level 4 and 5 are like like full security lockdown facilities.
Oh, okay.
Level 5, I believe, is juvenile detention. So don't quote me on that. Like I said, I'm not a professional.
So, in your experience, you said you worked at a level 2 facility.
I do work at a level 2 right now. Yeah.
And I know sometimes like, sometimes parents can't always make ends meet, and people see that, and then could that be, like, how do social services rank, kind of how what determines what?
Yeah.
if that
So
makes
the
sense?
level of the facility is really dependent on the children. Okay. So it's really sad to say, but those levels are for the children. Okay. So level 1 child won't have any issues, really. Probably won't give you any grief. A level 2 child may run away, may hurt themselves. Level 3, level 4, level 5, more leaning towards juvenile delinquency and criminal activity and at-risk behaviors.
Oh.
So, and then the different levels for the facilities just are to, it matches the levels of the children. So, level 2 child will come to a level 2 facility, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So when would you say, like, these levels, when in your experience, when would you say, like, you start seeing, like, these signs of, like, social anxiety or stuff where there's, like, underlying issues?
It doesn't matter the level.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
So it could start
with
at level
anxiety
1.
and depression, it's literally any level. There is anxiety and depression. Doesn't care what level the child is. It doesn't care how old the child is. It doesn't care what the child's been through. If a child has it, it has it. It's just how we're all wired differently and how we react differently to situations.
So what would you say is, like, the big age range of kids that kind of are seen in the foster care system? Like, from
I honestly I can't answer that with good knowledge, just because, like, my children's home, the one that I work at, is ages anywhere from 11 to 12 to 18. But some placement facilities, some children's homes have infants, toddlers. I'm not sure the different age ranges and the statistics for that.
So the next fact we're going to get into just kind of reinforces that 6% from the first one we got into. I pulled these numbers from the 3 biggest states that Johnson students are from. In Tennessee, there's almost 9,000 children in foster care. In North Carolina, there's 10,500. Illinois has almost 17,000. And in Indiana, there's almost 18,500 children in foster care.
So, quick story. I had mentioned that I have a lot of family and siblings that went through foster care. My cousin actually lives in Tennessee, and she had 2 foster care kids for a while, who actually recently just got adopted into the family, so that was nice.
Praise be.
Yeah, it was really,
Hallelujah, thank God.
Yeah, it was really
That's awesome.
cool. I mean, those kids, man. You look at them, and when you know some of these kids and where they come from, it just breaks your heart that some of these kids could go through that. How parents choose, life choices and stuff.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
it's never the kid's fault, or hardly ever is the kid's fault why they get put into foster care. And it's just crazy. And I'm from Illinois. I'm originally from Illinois, so that number actually really hits home close to me.
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous number, and it
Yeah.
should not be that high. It shouldn't be above 0.
Absolutely.
But it's not the way things are.
Yeah, we live in a fallen world, and ever since the fall, ever since sin entered the world, it's the world we live in. But I think we're called to make a difference in that. I really think we're called to use the gifts that God has given us and has blessed us with to make a difference in things like this, like the foster care system. Like I said, it only takes one caring adult, and that doesn't mean you have to work at a children's home, but you can easily just pray for a children's home, right? You can donate, you can volunteer at a children's home. The Bible says to care for the widows and the orphans, right? Gosh, you got to do something.
And it doesn't
These
even.
statistics aren't getting better.
No.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I would say, especially since COVID. I mean, I really feel like that only went up
Yeah.
since COVID because
Yeah,
a lot
and-
of things came to light.
I know with us, we're on a placement hold there for a while because of COVID, and it's like things like that. Like the process, if you ever get a chance, go on YouTube. The video on YouTube that I would charge you viewers and you guys to watch is called Removed, REMOVED. And if you want to look at what not always the case, but what the foster care system and the process looks like, that is a tear-jerking, heart-pulling. Oh, it's a tough video to watch.
I know of another one called Hard to Place. I saw it one time at a CIY. That one is definitely hard to watch.
And
It
honestly,
really tugs on
no, there won't be a lot of videos about the foster care system that are easy to watch.
Yeah,
That's
no,
just how it is.
no,
how it
it's crazy. Mark, how does that statistic make you feel about North Carolina? I know you're from North Carolina.
Yeah. It's kind of tough to hear. It's frustrating to hear because being from there, I expected more. I expected there to be more action, especially with, a place like Charlotte being such a main, business hub. There's
Yeah.
so much business going through. There's so much money going through that city. I expect there to be more emphasis put on bringing that number down because that's a pretty in the middle number, right? They get down to
Very significant, yeah.
I think Montana's got something like 1,000 kids in foster care, and California's got 52,000, right? Texas has around 30,000. So, being at, what was the number?
9,000, I think.
North Carolina
Oh.
being at 10,500. That's still a pretty big number for not a super huge state. So it's frustrating to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think though, like a lot of times people, like I was saying, people hear about it. We talk about it all the time, but like to see raw statistics, to like see actual numbers, I mean, man,
Yeah.
it's
And
crazy.
it should pull at you like that, but you can't quantify this stuff.
Mhm.
No.
Like this stuff, you can't put this. Yeah, statistics are important to help us understand, but you'll never understand unless you either live through it, or you help with it, or you work in it. And if you ever do, it changes your perspective on the whole thing. I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah, I say the term semi-adopted. I say that because I really don't know what you want to call it. I live with the host family. They're like my parents. I don't know what you want to call it. Semi-adopted, like, I didn't even, before working at the children's home, I didn't think about the foster care system. I didn't think about how broken the system is. I didn't think about how amazing the people who work and how strong the people who work in the foster care system are, foster families. I was talking to you guys a little bit earlier about my spiritual mother and father, Tammy and Todd Wilson. Shout out to you guys. Todd Wilson baptized me at the age of 20. So thank you, Todd. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. And they are foster parents, and the stories that they just tell me are hard to hear because these kids, they're broken. They've been lied to, they've been hurt, they've been corrupted, they've been misguided. And it just takes one caring adult. Thank God, praise be, my spiritual mother and father, Tammy and Todd Wilson, got to adopt one of their recent foster children, Maven. And it's beautiful. Like, he's grown up to be an amazing young man. And he had some trouble at first. You know, he had some trouble, and he still does. We're imperfect people. But he's come a long way. And it's examples like that. It just takes one caring adult.
It doesn't even take an adult, I don't think. I mean, just someone who knows that they care, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it takes one caring person, but in the sense of foster care and,
Right.
and adoption.
Right.
And
And I guess
that
it's
kind of
different for everyone too, especially if you're younger. Like I said, I was adopted at 15 years old, you know, so it took once I did get adopted, it took a long time for me to kind of like fully trust and fully
Yeah.
realize what was
Oh,
going
absolutely.
on, you know. And even now there are times where it's like, well, you know, it's hard, you know, it's hard to kind of believe, but
Yeah.
I had every opportunity to fall back into some of the things that my parents did, but I didn't. And a lot of that was because of the people who adopted me were so strongly pushing me not to do that, that, you know, now I'm sitting here. Honestly, if it wasn't for them, you
Yeah.
know, I would not be sitting here today doing this at
Well,
all.
praise be, thank God for them.
You know, for real, you know, and I mean, we have our ups and downs, but that's every family,
Yeah.
you know, and it really hurts me when I see people go through the same things, and it's a cycle. It's a cycle, you know. A lot of times, what happens to kids, they get repeated. It gets
Yeah.
repeated and repeated.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, the intergenerational abuse cycle that you're talking about. I did my literature review for my research and writing class on the childhood maltreatment and its effects on adult relationships. And, you know, my findings concluded that, which is unique, but the statistically significant statistic in the research was more likely to repeat the abuse, okay, with between physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. The kids who were emotionally abused were more likely to repeat it. The other two were not statistically significant. I think that just speaks volumes.
Yeah.
Because emotional abuse obviously can come with physical and sexual abuse, right? But emotional abuse may be happening, you don't even know it, right? Because that's how your parents treated you, you know? Because that's how you learn from grandma and grandpa, because that's how you learn from aunt and uncle, because that's how you learn from mom and dad. And that's the cycle you're talking about, that intergenerational abuse, that people like you and me, praise be, thank God, hopefully can break that link.
Right.
And that needs to be one of the biggest focuses, in my opinion.
You know, and like I said earlier, you know, it's kind of like a bubble, and once you kind of get outside of that bubble,
Yeah.
like you said, your whole perspective on everything changes. You
Right.
know, I mean, now coming from it, you know, you kind of want to go back into it and save those who you left behind. I feel like that sometimes. I really want to go back to some of the places I've been and save a lot of my friends that I had, you know. And like you said, praise to all the foster care workers out there, man. It takes a strong heart and a strong will. I probably could never do it because I would get too emotional. I'd get too attached to the kids.
Yeah, it's hard. It's difficult.
But,
And,
you know,
I only work part-time, but, you know, I plan to work full-time at the children's home while pursuing my master's in marriage and family therapy. And basically what I am now is a part-time house parent. I'm basically a part-time parent or big brother, since I'm a little younger. But that's what they are. When you work there, in that position. You know, there's case managers, there's administrative work as well, there's all kinds of other things, but the house parents, those are the people I respect a whole lot. And I respect every single one of them. Case managers, all of them alike. All of them the same. But a little bit more, I think, for the house parents, because they are walking with those kids every single day.
And can you imagine what this world would be like if every person on this planet was like that? Was like a house parent to kids?
It'd be New Jerusalem.
I mean,
It'd be heaven on earth.
I mean, could you just connecting with kids, people in general,
absolutely.
speaks volumes.
That utopia, utopiistic, I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. That kind of just unimagineable world is, I just get goosebumps when I think of that, because I think that's kind of what heaven's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
I know it is.
I have this burning desire down in my heart to start like a foster home where we have large scale, I don't even want to call it a foster home, more like just a place for people to go, really, where we have large scale like house parents and stuff like that, and just
So like
people
a
to
children's
connect.
home,
Yeah, but like
like a whole town.
yeah, kind of like on a bigger scale, like
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
like a ranch almost, like a
that'd
children
be cool.
like a foster ranch, I guess you could call it.
That'd be pretty dope, actually. Yeah.
I mean, like
some animal therapy.
me and Mark joked one day. We were like, we're just gonna stay single forever, move in, and become single parents.
Start a ranch.
There you go, man.
Mark, you've been kind of quiet. I want to hear from you, man. What are your thoughts? What are your opinions?
Yeah, I think for this topic, I have very minimal experience, so it's hard for me to really.
Yeah,
give
but
an
you have your
opinion.
convictions, Mark.
Yeah,
We
I
wanna
think
hear 'em.
it's hearing like the statistics and reading things like another statistic I have here is only in 2018, only 25% of foster kids were brought into families through the adoption process. Like statistics like that is really frustrating for me to hear. It's kind of hard for me to hear because that's such a the kids are the next generation. Like they take the world into the next phase, and so to just kind of abandon them like that feels really frustrating.
Mark, I almost disagreed with you there, but I misread the question. Because it says 25% of foster kids were taken by families who went through the adoption process.
Mhm.
Now, if that was 25% of kids were taken by families who went through the system in general, like
Yeah.
DCS, then 25% would be huge, like massive. I think it's a significantly low number of kids that are adopted that go through the foster, the placement, the system, which is a good thing, believe it or not, because the number one goal for the system, foster care system, is reconciliation with the families.
Mm-hmm.
So adoption is great if it's needed. But we want those kids. We want all the kids to go back to their families. We want their families to grow through whatever has happened, is happening. We want them to grow through that and process through it efficiently and in a healthy way.
Mhm.
That way they can start creating that attachment and reconnect.
How successful is that normally? Like the process of trying to put a child back into a home that they
Mark,
were
I don't
taken out of?
know the statistics, but I remember in training it was surprisingly high,
Yeah.
the amount of reconciliation that was happening.
I
Which
think
is a beautiful thing.
I think it varies case to case, because I know for me, like I said, so my mom, in total, I have almost 15 brothers and sisters in total from both my parents. My mom has 9 kids. I am one of 9. I'm the oldest out of all my siblings, except for the 2 because of my adoption. I'm the oldest out of all 9 of my biological siblings, and all my mom's kids, except for 2, me and my youngest sister went through the foster care system and all ended up being adopted. What happened was the sibling that came after me, my younger sister, was adopted, and then it was kind of a domino effect. And so every time my mom had a kid, it was straight into the foster care system until she had 2 that were taken by the state, and then they went into the foster care system by the state. So I have a couple of siblings that are relatively close to each other.
Yeah.
And then there are some that are kind of out there, So I think it varies depending on the case, and like your history with DCS, and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And and in my opinion, sometimes I feel like child protective services give too many chances to the parents.
Yeah.
With
I think
reconsidering,
yeah, that
reconciling their relationships.
yeah, it really depends because I think chances need to be given.
Right.
And if so, like my biological father, who molested many of my family members, including my sister, if if that man was given a chance, then I would understand. But I think the biggest goal should remain reconciliation with the family.
Yeah.
Just because that healthy attachment is
Well,
important
when
from birth.
Yeah, when and I agree, but like when there's a cycle from the parents, like, because you have so many steps for those of you who don't know kind of what it's like. The parents are given steps that they need to take, and then if you meet those steps, you're good, and it's very fine print too. So like, say this is in my experience exclusively. I don't know about other people. Say like you have to have a job. Well, you apply for a job, you get a job, you work there for a week, you show that, then they say, okay, well that's step one, and they check the box. You don't have to keep the job for so long. And I think the rules and regulations vary state to state too. So like I said, that's just kind of my experience. But I
Yeah,
know
they
that
typically have to go through, through the steps to show that they can support a child in a healthy environment.
And when you're not making those steps and you have 8 other
They just
kids,
keep
like,
continuing to go to court.
it's kind of a cycle. It's cyclical, and then it's not healthy for these kids either. In and out of their
Yeah,
parents'
no,
home.
I think, and Devin, I think that's a very unique case. With so many kids with that cycle that you're talking about. In that case, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Because it seems like the parent didn't want to get better, but keeps putting kids through this and keeps just not growing and not processing in a healthy way and not getting through what she needs to get through. So in that way, I would agree with you. But.
And not to mention, a lot of these statistics are just what have been reported too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't even things that aren't reported. I don't know how much bigger that number would be, but I would assume it'd be higher because I know that it doesn't always get reported. Things don't always get, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't always get brought into the light and get acknowledged,
Yeah.
which is kind of unsettling.
Yeah. What statistic are you talking about? That
Just in general, like 6% of kids, or different things like,
yeah, so you mean
you
like
know-
what I was talking about earlier with like, the homeless kids who
Yeah.
haven't been reported.
Yeah, stuff
Yeah.
like that. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
frightening.
It is. Yeah.
So, what are some reasons that you see that kids are being placed in the foster care system? And what is
Yeah.
like the process for that foster care and adoption and different like arrangements that can be made?
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to touch on this. Adoption, I don't really know a ton about. Okay.
Mhm.
Like I said, I'm semi-adopted. I know it's a lengthy process with a lot of paperwork. That can be expensive, but I don't know a lot about it, the adoption part, right? But let's go into foster care. So reasons that I've seen kids in foster care, they literally vary from like one side of the spectrum to the other, right? So like I said earlier, I know a kid who was in foster care for skipping school. I know one who was in there for drug addict mom. Okay. I know one that was in there for running away from home so many times. A lot in our facility. Some kids come from level 3 facilities when they get leveled down, so they are on good behavior. Okay. And that's like too many fights, robbery.
Yeah.
And then some kids come from level 1 facility who, their parents can't meet ends meet. they can't financially support the children, right? It could be like, it's a whole array of things. I've experienced a lot of different kids with a lot of different backgrounds, right? Now, the process for foster care, that video removed that I had mentioned earlier is a beautiful view. It's a beautiful insight. Let me say that. It's a beautiful insight on the process for foster care. What happens is the police are called. I believe DCS follows up with the phone call. Say it's domestic abuse or child abuse, right? Say child abuse. A kid comes to class with bruises. Teacher calls the police. The cops come and check it out. They do a little digging. They investigate. They have to make sure it is what it is before it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then when they constitute enough evidence for taking the child, there's like criteria that it has to meet, whatever. Then the video removed has a big part of this. A case manager comes with normally a police officer. Case manager takes the child or children, and then they go to a DCS office. Sometimes there is no facility for the child to go to or foster care family. So sometimes the child has to sleep in the DCS office overnight on the floor or in a cot. Yeah. Right.
That's why I want to start that foster ranch. Kind of that
Yeah,
intermission
no,
between.
that would be beautiful.
Kind of
There
that
is.
intermission
So have you heard about
between-
Isaiah House?
Yeah, I have.
I think Isaiah House does something like, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. So it's a sad, I wish it didn't have to happen kind of process. And a lot of these kids, they don't have enough time or don't have the funds or whatever. A lot of these kids come to like the children's home with trash bags with their clothes stuff. So, but like I said, adoption I don't really know a ton about. So.
Yeah.
I can tell you, for me, it was kind of easy because both my parents had signed off on their rights. But I know it does get.
Yeah, that's.
I know it gets.
Yeah.
Lengthy.
It can be really complicated.
I know people who have been in it for 10 years plus. They've been foster kids for 10 years plus and are just like getting paperwork done.
Yeah.
I mean, and kind of at that point though, the family's kind of new and they kind of accepted them into it. But it can be. It's a lot of legal work, a lot of legal battles.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through.
Yeah.
And I'm no expert on this either. But it's definitely a difficult and strenuous process for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you said you work in kind of a children's home, and one of the big criticisms that I was reading about the foster care system is that group homes, children's homes are so often the go-to for the foster care system. They don't necessarily always put them into a foster home with a family, but more so like a group home. Do you have, what's your take on that? Is that like because there's not foster homes to put kids in, or is that just
so
laziness?
I know a lot with this area, and I think it holds true to a majority of the nation. It is because there is not a lot of foster care families. There's not a lot of room for these children, right? Even the group homes are starting to get crowded.
Yeah.
It's sad. It really is. But yeah, from what I've seen, they go to the group in children's homes and foster homes, not foster homes, group homes, children's homes, more so placement facilities. And a placement facility can be while the children is waiting for a foster family. Then foster families. But also, I've had 3 kids at the children's home who ran away from their foster families to get back to the children's home because the foster families were just so not good to them. And if you watch the video Removed, again, I'm going to plug it in here, Removed, REMOVED on YouTube. There's 2 parts, I believe. A lot of these kids have a hard time adjusting, whether the foster family is neglectful or prayerfully that's not the case. These kids could just have a problem adjusting to a caring family, right? Because they're not used to that. That makes them uncomfortable, and they don't want to be uncomfortable. What they're comfortable with is what they're used to. What they're used to is the things we don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's interesting that it says that's a criticism, because oftentimes I don't know if they have a choice.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that may just also come with people's lack of knowledge about, and that's kind of why we're here, is to talk about
Yeah,
it.
no, for sure. And
so-
this is my perspective, working at the children's home.
Right.
This could be different in California,
Yeah.
right? This
Yeah.
could be different in Indiana. This could be different in Texas. So.
In your experience, kind of, what you've seen, how long do kids usually stay in foster care?
Yeah, that's a good question.
If you had to like guesstimate like a certain length of time, I know it could be any amount of time, but is there
Yeah.
like a typical?
I would say 3 to 6 months. Hopefully, prayerfully.
Yeah.
And then they're with their families again. Or they find another family member who takes them in, who can take them in and support them. There's been a couple kids that I know of at my place of work who are aging out, which means they stay until they're 18.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, you don't want a kid to age out. Right?
No.
You don't want a kid to age out, and it breaks my heart because one of the children at the home has a 2-year-old daughter. And he's almost age out.
Yeah, I know once you age out of the foster care system, your chances of getting that kid back, it's kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
It's harder to-
there's opportunities.
Yeah.
It really depends on how the kids were cared for and whatever facility they stayed in. If they want to pursue opportunities, DCS does give them opportunities. I know they, some DCS places, some states I would say more so, help with college, help pay for college. It just really depends on the child.
Well, and like you said earlier, you know, they don't want to be uncomfortable. They want to be comfortable. You know, they don't
Yeah,
want
so they're
to
gonna go
leave their
back.
comfort zone.
They're just gonna go to the lifestyle they knew, and
Yeah, that's kind of that
and
whole
you're right,
cycle.
You're right.
That,
If a kid ages out and he's still involved in at-risk behaviors, it's really hard. I know research has proven this. It's really hard to change their lifestyle and their way of life.
All right. So when you are looking at foster care, specifically like in children's homes, how often is the child's voice being heard, like their desires and their needs that they're expressing? How often are things like that met?
Yeah. So there's definitely a difference between their desires and their needs.
Yeah.
Especially with the children's home that I work at. So the desires are often not met.
Yeah.
Because they desire to drink alcohol. They desire to smoke tobacco products. They desire all of these things that they just aren't going to get because the children's home cares for them so much.
Yeah.
Right? It's things that will not aid in a fruitful life.
Now, I hate to cut you off there, but I did read something about that a large number of kids who come into foster care have issues with alcohol dependency.
Yeah.
Is that a pretty predominant
Yes.
issue throughout?
Yes, it is. It is, especially level 2 and above.
Yeah.
Facilities level 2 and above. It's a pandemic in the foster care system. It's just because they were given so much freedom, I guess, when they lived at home, that they could make whatever choices they wanted. You know, they may not have had a parent that cared enough to tell them, don't do that. That's not going to be good for you. That's going to affect you in a negative way.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about my job is I can walk through life with these kids and tell them, hey, that is a choice that may not be in your best interest for the long term. Because, I was a kid once too, and I thought very short term. I thought about the next day, not the next 10 years, right? So putting that into perspective for these kids, I think helps a lot, and just, caring for them. Now, the child's needs, they're met, okay? Even more so than what their basic needs are,
Yeah.
obviously clothes, food, shelter. But they also, like, each cottage on at our facility has like an Xbox and a TV and Netflix, and they can like watch entertainment and chill and all that stuff.
Why would you consider like an Xbox and a TV and stuff like that for these kids specifically a need?
I did not consider that a need. I said their needs were met and even more so.
Oh,
So they
sorry,
get-
I
they get-
misunderstood. Okay,
Yeah, no,
I
they get-
misunderstood.
They get things for entertainment beyond their needs.
So, what are considered kind of like, what are like some healthy boundaries while the child is in foster care, foster home, or whatever? What are like some healthy boundaries for them and their parents, and like who kind of determines that? Does like the foster home, foster care people, or is that like the state thing or the caseworker thing?
Yeah, so that's a caseworker court thing.
Okay.
So the courts and the caseworker will determine what is healthy for the child, what they can handle at this time of their life, and what would be best for them.
So we talked a little bit about alcohol dependency being a pretty common struggle with kids coming in and going through the foster care system. What are some of the other big struggles, whether that be like depression, anxiety, or alcohol dependency? What are some of the big struggles that you see foster kids experiencing?
Yeah, so in this season of life right now, and it's always changing, these things always change. Nothing is concrete, especially when it comes to qualitative things such as this. But I think the biggest thing right now that I'm seeing is definitely just the kids and their needs and their wants, desires to fit in. And they will do whatever it takes to fit in, okay? They will sneak contraband on the campus. They'll run away. They'll cuss out the house parent. You know, whatever they do that helps them fit in. I don't know why they have such a need to fit in. Maybe they felt like they didn't fit in with their family. Okay. Maybe their family's different from what they're experiencing at the children's home, and they don't want others to know that because they want to be cool. You know, I just don't know. I don't know that dynamic. But that's like the biggest thing I see right now. Honestly, I don't see a whole lot of depression and anxiety. More so because I'm not working with them clinically.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely just their desire, their thirst to fit in. They'll go beyond measures to do that. So
That's crazy. Kind of like, you would think like, kind of once, but I guess too, you said you work with a lot of younger kids, right?
yeah.
I guess too, being younger kids, they kind of like, they aren't really thinking about, long-term things more than short-term things. Kind of like, I guess, like delayed gratification versus instant gratification, kind of. Being cool. It's still crazy to think about how, like, you don't see, like you said, the depression at such a young age.
Yeah.
But you said you're also not working with them like on a clinical level. But I do think that you can tell when people have got, certain like depression or anxiety. I feel like there are telltale signs.
Yeah, there are, but Devin, it's challenging to pick up on because these kids they've learned their whole lives to mask it.
Right. I know
they
that's
do a very good job at it.
I know that's something that I did for a while, and I still do sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, a majority of these kids are going to suffer from acute depression or mild anxiety.
Right.
Like, that's almost like a baseline for the children's home because of the things that they've gone through and the things that they're going through.
Right.
Okay. But yeah, the severe depression, the major depressive disorder, the severe anxiety, it's not always easy to pick up on. But when you do, you do. You can tell. You can tell.
So another thing I read was that 30% of homeless people in the U.S. were previously in the foster care system and became homeless just because they aged out and didn't have the proper assistance to help them afterwards. Do you have any experience in this area? How often do people age out, and are there options to to help them out after
Yeah.
they exit the
Yeah,
foster care system?
it's a good question, Mark. Like I said, I know 2 kids who are aging out. That's it so far. But I said a little bit of this earlier. They give you or try to give you the resources. They set you up. There's a whole before you age out. There's a career thing that you go through and finding a workplace after you age out or finding a college. I think it really, really just depends on the student. And, obviously, always there's socioeconomic factors from their previous household, from their parents. They're going to play a factor.
Right.
Mine did.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. That's how the economy works. But I think it really just depends on the child. If they have that drive to go to college, to find a good paying job, to find a job, period, right? One of the kids I know who's about to age out, actually, let me say this. A girl that aged out this last year, she went off to college, which is beautiful. She's going to college for art.
Hallelujah.
And then, a kid that's about to age out in March, who has a 2-year-old daughter, he plans on working after, but it's really hard to tell with him.
Yeah.
So it depends on the child.
On a kind of quick side note, would you say, like, in your experience, how would you say, like, these foster kids kind of output, like, a lot of their fear, anger, and stuff like that? Would you say they're kind of more creative people, or like, how would you...
No,
No?
I'd say they're pretty straight to the point. One of our caregivers passed away from COVID, unfortunately. And, one of our children was super close with him and tore up the wall. If they're mad, they're mad. If they're mad at you, they'll tell you they're mad at you. I've gotten cussed out multiple times. But on the flip side, okay, I don't want people thinking this is a terrible place. It's a beautiful place, and God is moving.
Yeah.
Right? So I work the girls' cottages quite often, and a girl that had claimed atheism, and she's an atheist, still is, for the longest time, the last time I worked, she offered to pray at the end of the night, because I pray with whatever cottage I'm working with at the end of my shift. And she offered to pray. It was a funny prayer, and it was, thanks God for this day and this bread.
Yeah.
But it's just little seeds like that who definitely are the mustard seeds that the Bible so lovingly tells us about.
So, would you say, like, a lot of these kids kind of suffer from, like, a fear, like, an anxiety of, like, not being adopted, or would you say they more so hope to go back to their families?
I haven't met a kid who's been worried about being adopted. A majority of the kids at the facility that I work at are going back to their families or are aging out. So with that being said, I can't generalize and speak for the whole foster care system. But from my experience at my facility, they're not really worried or anxious about getting adopted.
That's reassuring to hear, though.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Absolutely.
I was honestly kind of afraid of that question.
Yeah.
Because I was really scared of what the outcome would be, but...
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank God, praise be,
Yeah.
that these kids are looking forward to being with their families and reconcile with their families.
So now just kind of a closing question. We've talked a lot about, what it's like within for the kids within the foster care system. Say that, I'm a listener and I want to foster a child. What is that process like for me to
Google.
do?
No, it starts with your state, so it's going to be different in every state. So I can't really speak on specific things to do. Fill out this application at this website. There's this.
Yeah.
I would definitely maybe go to a DCS office in your area if you really want to foster a family. And then the process, the process looks like taking classes, making sure that you're prepared and able to foster children, especially at-risk youth. So you'll do like trauma crisis intervention training and things like that they'll train you in, and learning how to walk with these children, okay, who have been through traumatic experiences in life. And with that closing question, I also want to, if you guys don't mind, I have scripture here that I would like to close with as well.
Absolutely.
So James 1:27 says, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world." We had talked so much today about that one caring person, right? Devin, you're right when you said it doesn't have to be an adult, one caring person in these kids' lives, okay? We don't know what these kids go through, all right? We don't know their background. I don't know half of these kids' backgrounds. Whatever they're comfortable with telling me, they'll tell me. So we are called to treat every brother and sister in Christ the same, no matter if they're in a foster care system or if they're in a loving family with two parents, $60,000 a year, and a dog and a white picket fence. We're called to love all of these children the same and these people the same. And I think that could be a challenge for us when approaching that mindset, when approaching the foster care system is, my prayer, Jesus, is for you to give me the heart to love these kids as you love them, and the eyes to see these kids as you see them. So, appreciate you guys having me on.
Real
Yes.
quick before you go, Dak, though, I do
Yeah.
want to have a couple of things. I know you mentioned your home that you work with. Is there any way that the listeners or me and Mark or whatever can kind of help with that, donate anything you guys need anything to help with, or any way we can get involved and kind of help you guys out, support you?
Yeah, for sure. If you guys want to donate, I mean, you're more than welcome to. If you want to pray, you're more than welcome to pray. If you want to volunteer, you can volunteer. If you want to work there, you can work there. It's SMCH or just smch.org. So Smoky Mountain Children's Home.org, smch.org.
And what was that video you had talked about again?
Yes, the YouTube video. Please, 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 all of you listeners, you beautiful people, I love all of you. Thank you so much for listening. The video is called Removed. I implore you, I challenge you, I charge you to watch it because it shines a beautiful but humbling light on the foster care system. Removed. REMOVED.
Yeah, we'll try to link that in the Instagram somehow for you guys who want to see that.
Put it maybe in the description of the YouTube video.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll make sure you guys have access to it somehow.
You guys can put it in your bio until the next podcast or something.
Yeah.
Before we go, Dak, is there any way that we can be praying for you? We're going to get into prayer requests now. Do you have any prayer requests that you want to offer up?
Yeah, so actually the next 2 weekends I'm working a 24-hour shift at the children's home. So Saturday 8 a.m. to Sunday 8 a.m. the next 2 weekends. So definitely prayer in that. Because, with school, with being a youth minister, with another youth group, with FCA, with recruitment teams, with being an RA, with working in the mechanic shop, with school, with friends. It's a lot. So just prayer for time management and peace and just the heart to love as God has so graciously blessed me with.
Amen.
Well, Dak, we definitely have enjoyed having you on.
Yeah.
Such a blessing. See a lot of good things coming from you.
Our last prayer request just goes out for the families with Austin East High School in East Knoxville. Just be praying for those families having to experience the loss of a child and going through that kind of grief and the frustration of, nobody being held accountable for that. So just be praying for peace with those families. I think that's all we got for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. We love all of you.
Yes.
We'll see you guys next week.
Love you all very much.
See you guys next
God
week.
bless.